Black Panther has engendered within us this desire to go to the mythical land of Wakanda and create that in our own way. But there is a true land, a historical land that is just as mythical as Wakanda. And we're going to talk about that right now on Blacks with Power. I'm Father Jabril, and this is Jawbread TV. All right, y'all. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Blacks with Power. I'm your host, Father Jabril Ballantine, and in this episode of the show, we're watching. We saw Black Panther, the movie, and even still, it is resonating with us. It has resonance, and it will have resonance for God willing, for years to come, at least around a certain sector of us. And yes, many of us have put away our dashikis again. Many folk have gotten rid of their colors and so on and so forth, and went back to being just normal Black Americans. But at least for a moment, we were proud citizens of Wakanda. Almost as proud, or probably prouder than we were when we all became loyal subjects of Zamunda. But it was, it was funny to see, it was good to see, it was great to see, it was sad to see, it was all kinds of things to see, because we see what we really see in the phenomenon that became Black Panther, right, is the power of this, the unifying power of this this proud African land, this proud African nation, this triumphant African nation that is able to withstand everything, right? That was able to withstand the effects and protect itself from the effects of white supremacy, of colonialism, of slavery, of exploitation, and all of the degradation that comes with that. And so we have this Black nation that was left alone, and because it was left alone, it had this rich legacy, and this rich future, and this rich present, right? And not just unifying for Africans, but unifying for African people, unifying for people of African descent, unifying for the descendants of those who were enslaved, unifying for everyone. It just had this triumphant feel, right? I mean, tell me, how did you feel watching Black Panther, thinking back to when you saw the movie? What are your thoughts? Put that in the comments. Let me know. What were your thoughts? What was the resonance with you? What did it do to you? What did it do for you to see that movie? And how did it make you proud to be an African, right? But we all know that that's a mythical country, right? It doesn't really exist. I mean, I would love to find out that it really existed, right? That there's this obscure nation that's been hiding itself for generations, right? But, in history, we did indeed have that, and people have asked me, as you look around me and you see the Ethiopian flag, you see the Ethiopian colors, you see Ethiopian alphabets, you see on my new book cover, Black Power, not Black Panther, Black Power, that I have the Ethiopian iconography, that everything around me is Ethiopian. Now, sidebar. Historically, our family tradition is that we are Ethiopian. My dad was raised, his siblings were raised that, we are not Negro, we are Ethiopian. My grandfather, who was born in 1918, was fluent in Ge'ez, said that he was Ethiopian, that his mother was from Ethiopia. And, no one has ever proved it, but a man who was born in 1918, who was born in Sardis, Mississippi, who did not have a grade school education, somehow was fluent in Ge'ez, so much so that he was able to teach Ge'ez. Ge'ez is the ancient Ethiopic language. It is to the modern languages, Amharic and Tigrinya, it is to the modern languages what Latin is to Italian and French. It is the root language. Ge'ez is the ancient language, the language that is still used by the church, sort of like how the Roman church used to use Latin until, a few decades ago, I guess. But this man with no formal education whatsoever was fluent in Ge'ez. So, you tend to believe him when he says that, we're Ethiopian. So, of course, I have this deep-rooted history. I got tape of my grandfather talking about how it's so important that black people learn Ge'ez, that it is the language of the free people, that Ethiopians were the free people. And historically, if you understand just the context, like here is this African nation, Ethiopia, that was able to stay free from colonialism. I mean, yeah, it suffered a little 5-year stint when Mussolini under World War II. But I mean, Battle of Adwa in 1896, when Emperor Menelik II defeated the Italian invasion, the Italians coming with guns and planes and all kinds of stuff, and Ethiopians largely armed with spears and the Ark of the Covenant and their faith were able to defeat the Italians. And here is this nation of Christian kings, Christian that dates back before Europe even come out of the Dark Ages, before Europe even heard about Christianity. They actually had a hand in taking Christianity to Europe. Some Christian nation that was marginally, nominally Christian since Acts 8:28, when the Ethiopian eunuch, their finance minister, who as a Jewish state every year they would take their tithe to the temple, pay the temple tax for the Passover, was on his way back from paying, the finance minister was on his way back from paying Ethiopia's tithe to the temple, and on his way back is baptized and becomes Christian. And him, the finance minister, the secretary of treasury, if you would, takes back Christianity into Ethiopia, and the nation becomes Christian, and later gets the church. A couple hundred years later gets the formalized church, not from Europe, not from white folks, but from Egypt. Pre-Arab invasion Egypt, meaning it was still black Egypt. So this ancient Christian tradition that is shaped, that is formed, that came to be, that's developed its theology without the influx of and influence of white supremacy. So you have this historical tradition, this faith tradition, this country that for years, while the Arab invasion was going on and all lands around Ethiopia were cut off from the quote unquote Western world, the white world, the Christian world, quote unquote, you had this incubated, isolated, hidden land of Ethiopia that grew during that period untouched by Western society. Pretty much the same story as Wakanda, right? And you have this badass king, Emperor Haile Selassie. This badass king comes to be, and the king is reviving that legacy and tradition of being descendant from King Solomon and Queen Sheba, the Queen of Sheba, Queen Makeda, my daughter's name. But that Makeda and Sheba had Makeda and Solomon had Menelik, and Menelik begat a whole line of kings that came all the way down to Rastafari McKinnon or Haile Selassie. And so this crown, this ancient Christian crown that has a legacy that was historically Jewish, descended from Solomon and converted to be Christian. So it's an older kingdom than any of the kingdoms in the Western world. It has to be respected by all of those kings, by Queen Elizabeth, by all of the crowns, has to be, because by legacy, it is older. It came before. Here's this badass king that comes on the scene in 1930s and the world just erupts. I mean, delegations from all around the world come to see him. And we as black people really embrace that the same way that we embrace Wakanda. Like, imagine this, y'all. You'll see how much fanfare there was. I mean, T'Challa ain't gonna never walk into our midst, right? But how much fanfare there still was seeing him on the screen, and how many people were so in awe. And you saw the clips of people in the movie theaters drumming and celebrating and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this went on in America over a real king. Like, this went on in Black America over a real king, over Haile Selassie. You can talk about when he went to Harlem and visited Abyssinian Baptist Church, and the cross that he gave them, and all the fanfare that surrounded him in Black America wherever he went, the fanfare that surrounded him. You can watch the documentaries of the fanfare that surrounded him when he went to Jamaica. I mean, this type of unifying force that we saw in this Black Panther phenomena did actually exist, has happened for us as a people surrounding the nation of Ethiopia. And every reason why all of us were so enraptured with Wakanda and with the movie Black Panther is every reason why, and more so why, because this is a real nation, why I am enraptured, and why I posit to you the importance of embracing Ethiopia. And so the perspective when we talk about emancipating ourselves from mental slavery, and we have to go somewhere. Dr. King talks about the problem with freedom from slavery is that we were made free to be poor. We were made free to poverty because we were made free. We were put off plantations. We were let go from plantations, but we didn't have nowhere to go. And so eventually we found our way back to the plantation. And so if we are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, we got to have somewhere to go. Mentally, spiritually, in our soul, we got to have some place to go. And we got to have some place to go that's going to have that sort of transcendent, unifying power, that same sort of effect that we saw with Wakanda, with Black Panther, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the history of all these nations. When I say nations, I'm not talking about the nation states that have been configured by the scramble for Africa. I'm talking about the nations, the Akan nations, the Igbo nations, the Zulu nations, the Abesha nations, the nations of peoples, and the great nations, and the great history, and the great legacy, and the great traditions. But you see, they have not transcended to such a level to have the sort of effect that Wakanda has had. But we know historically, Ethiopia has had that sort of effect where people were willing to go over to Ethiopia when Italy invaded Ethiopia. Black Americans were willing to go over and fight for Ethiopia, that people were instantly becoming Ethiopian, that we as a people had embraced that identity as we struggled for our own political and economic freedom here, understanding and appreciating the defiant stance of Ethiopia there, and embracing that and identifying that with that, because as we saw them defeat the odds, it gave us hope that we too would defeat the odds. And the kingdom is still around. Yes, the powers that be, the white powers of the world, they couldn't find a way to defeat Haile Selassie. They couldn't find a way to get rid of him, so they conspired. The communists and the capitalists conspired together to, foment discord within the empire. And there was this revolution of students and whatnot inside. Students that ironically Haile Selassie had sent to school, but students nonetheless that fomented this whole discord inside and ended up with his overthrow. And so yes, the empire that is in exile, but it's still here. There was a recent article, and I'm gonna post it in the description to this episode, but there's a recent article about one of the princes, descendants of Haile Selassie, was just married to a sister girl from around the way. And I'm gonna post that, but it was a beautiful wedding. I used to attend the church, every now and again I'd attend the church in Oxon Hill, Maryland, where they got married. Beautiful, beautiful church. Oh my God, it's a beautiful church. But it's still around. And so that sort of inspiration is still available to us. That sort of power, the potency of that identity is still available to us. And so I'm encouraging you and I to embrace it. And I do embrace it. And it is in that spirit that I give you what I have. So yes, you hear me talk about Christianity, and some of you may be like, but understand, it is that Christian spirit that is interpreted through the Ethiopic lens. right? It is that free spirit, that free Christian spirit, unadulterated by white supremacy. And so it is that Christian interpretation that I offer you, that I believe for you, will enable us all to transcend white supremacy. I think that is the power, brothers and sisters, the mythical power of the land of Ethiopia. I'm gonna post some resources in the description for this episode, and I ask you to check them out. Just check them out and learn some things about Ethiopia that you may not have known. And then let me know, what do you think about Ethiopia? And yes, understanding that it's in all sorts of turmoil right now, right? And we understand as well that that's by design, right? But what do you think of the imperial Ethiopia? And the notion of comparing the power of Ethiopia with the power of Wakanda on the black psyche. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So share your answers in the comments below. Because, brothers and sisters, you and I, a charge to keep we have, brothers and sisters, a God to glorify, a never dying soul to save and fit it for the sky. We have come a long way, but Lord knows there is so much further to go. So let us march on till victory is won. Live with power.